Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I can concur. Silence. Be me. Russian in a rural area, late 90s, early 2000s. Between 15 and 20 years of age. House in the middle of nowhere. Not sure what you call it in English, but it's like a large field surrounded by woods in a circle. Not really a farm, but had lots of space, a few pigs, and some garden patches. Mostly just weeds. Now we were about a 20-minute walk from any other houses. It was all farmland with big spaces of state-owned land in between. Nothing really there. Drive about half an hour to get to town. Very remote, pretty lonely. This is Russia after all. There isn't a lot of sun. Most days are overcast and gray. Unless it's the middle of summer, there are very few birds. No squirrels, nothing. In the winter when it snows, everything is covered. It is very surreal being outside or alone. Actually, it is very strange being alone inside as well. Everything is silent, so silent you get accustomed to that buzzing sound that makes you notice the silence. It just goes away. This is what we call true silence or dead silence. My grandma told me once it means the land you are on is given to the dead. Still, we live there, because it is much cheaper than living in the city, and my father worked as a laborer, handyman, which is needed more in the country. I have a few stories I could tell from the time I lived there, if anyone is interested. It isn't exactly the outback, but still remote. Okay, so the first one that comes to mind. A lot of people do not know, but Russia has lots of wild dogs. Not like wolves, but just packs of domestic dogs that have run together and around so much they are all just big mutts. They can be very dangerous, especially towards children. There was one patch of woods we knew weren't to go to because of dogs. A large pack hung around this spot, which was between our home and our neighbors, all woods, on the eastern side of the property. One day my neighbor's child disappeared. They called us up and me, my father and brother started from our end of the woods and went towards there, so we could search, and both families met in the middle. Heading through the field, father has hunting rifle, I have rabbit gun. Brother is too young for guns, but he picked up a big stick. We are all nervous about this area. Enter woods. Father tells us to walk slowly and keep watchful. We see a few dogs running around. They are circling us. Most of the time wild dogs are wary of groups, so we kept a tight circle. Getting closer, we can begin to hear our neighbors crashing around. They were much louder than us. I don't think they hunted. Come to a smaller grove, thanks a dried out stump of fallen tree in the middle. Scent of pure shit and iron in the air. Notice blood, scraps of cloth around the ground. Come to the middle, see animal carcasses. No fur. Long blonde hair. It is a child, dead. The dogs had dragged her and tore her up. Most of her was gone. It was hard to recognize it as a person at all. They had eaten her, or most of her. Dogs are circling all around us. We have in their territory near their food. Father is pissed, shoots at them. They run off. Neighbors are in tears. Mother is holding what is left of her. Blood is all over her clothes and her body is sort of just coming apart. Father of the girl finally convinces wife to drop it. We separate. Father tells them to call if ever needed. Neighbors call police. They come to collect the remains. Animal control does half-ass job and puts down one dog, as if it was just the one. Neighbors really don't talk to us anymore, and we don't talk about what happened. Where I live, everyone just sort of pretends the bad things didn't happen. Or at least, accept that it happened and no longer want to discuss it. That patch of woods though, I only went back a few times. It felt very oppressive being there, and the hair on my neck is always standing, for dogs are still always circling. They never attack me, and I always took a rifle anyway, but it was not a good place. It was cursed or something for sure after that day. I forgot to add, The police determined that the girl was probably killed while on their property and drug away. They found a blood trail leading back to the edge of their land and a juice pouch she had been drinking. She was 10 years old and just out playing in the field. Makes me sad to think of.
B16. Exploring woods, north side of property. If you go far enough along, there is an old Soviet building. It's not quite a bunker, but it is sunk into the ground, a thick concrete dome sort of like an igloo. Father said it was a munitions depot, but to be honest he was drunk and was probably fooling. There is a big rusted iron door that is open but stuck in the same position. Decide to go inside. I'd seen it before but never went to it. Inside it stinks. I recognize the smell of iron from before with the dogs. I instantly understand it as blood and rotted produce. Old mattress on the floor. The kind with no springs, just cotton. Lots of blankets and sheets, everything covered in mud and maybe some kind of grease. Cans laying everywhere, little spot for a fire with a mesh grill and cement blocks in a circle. Graffiti all over the walls in different color paints. Some religious symbols like Orthodox crosses, pentagrams and the Islamic moon, don't know what it is called. Feel sort of sick. It's a lot to take in, after all this has sat in peace near my home all this time. The longer I look the more I notice. Animal bones, small things like rabbits but a few things like antlers. Some carcasses and skins, parts of dogs laying around. I now understand what the meat on the mesh grill is. It is charred black like it was just left, no fire though, no heat or smell of smoke. Probably there for a day or two. Back out. Have to turn and kind of shift through the space of the door. When I peek my head around, I think I see a person's head duck from the ridge of the hill. He had dirty brown clumped hair like dreadlocks and a big beard. Dirt all over his face. This person has been living out here hunting dogs and huffing paint. Leave in a hurry. I don't even check to see if what I saw was real. Tell family. Father calls police. They ask if it is on our property, he tells them no. They basically say if he is not trespassing or bothering anyone they will not consider it a priority at this time. Just sort of accept there is a crazed vagrant in the woods, probably 30 minutes walk away. Life goes on for a few days. I am outside feeding our pigs and getting their shelter ready for winter. I look past our fence to the tree line and spot him. It looks to be the same person. He is wearing what looks like a tarp or maybe a trash bag with holes cut out for his arms and legs. He's far away but I'm pretty sure he was wearing several pairs of pants. It looked really puffed out and baggy. The outer ones were ripped and I could see different cloth. He's just kind of standing there. I don't really know what to do and we look at each other for a minute. He goes back into the trees. My heart is pounding. I go back inside and get my father's rifle. I am home alone today, so I sit by the window and listen to the radio. The rest of my family got home later that night from shopping in town. I'm helping move all the groceries from our truck into the house. Who is that over there? My mother says. I haven't said anything about him yet because it's just all very weird. Instantly I am nervous. I look where she is pointing and there he is. Father waves and yells a greeting. The man in the woods does nothing, starts walking along the tree line. I tell them I saw him earlier, tell them he is the man I saw from the building. We all go inside. Don't bother calling the police because he wasn't technically on our property. We have a few dogs of our own. I didn't want them to get hurt by him so I kept them inside that night. I woke up very early that morning, before dawn. Father is pissed. He went out early because the dogs were all restless. He regularly wakes up around 4 a.m. so this was not strange. He tells me 2 of our pigs are missing and that our barbed wire has been cut. We both know who the culprit is. He has gone too far. Get the dogs, get the rifles. Father calls his brother so he drives over. We head into the woods as the sun is still rising. Make the hike to the building. It is fall, that dead silence again. Area is thick with trees and it's a cloudy day, it's still really dark. Reach the building. Stink of shit and blood again. Quietly approach. Dogs are okay but they are nervous. They smelled it before we did, of course. Uncle and I stand on either side of the steps to the big door. Father is in front in the middle. He shouts if anybody is there, no answer. We go in. Same as before mostly, only this time we see one of our pigs. He is on the floor on his side, with a trash bag over his face. He is not stuck or cut, he was simply smothered by the bag. The pig had shit all over the floor when it died. It seemed no effort was made to clean it thus far. Leave the building. All three circle around, looking down the hill towards the trees, trying to spot him. Uncle shouts, he sees someone in the trees. We go to where he is standing. I see something flesh-colored, standing about with arms and legs stretched out. Looks off but can't place it. Go downhill. It is our sow. She is strung up by her legs pulled out, between two trees like she is going to be gutted. She has a crown of brambles on her head. Swastikas, pentagrams, curse words cut into her skin all over. The skin from her face has been peeled off. Spray paint all over where its face once was. Orthodox crosses carved into the two trees. We are all very freaked out by this chaos. My uncle says he is going to puke. We book it back up the hill keeping an eye out. We are not so rough and ready anymore. If we had tails they would have been between our legs all the way home. After that everything is quiet again. We fixed our fence and kept a strong lookout for a few weeks. We didn't see him anymore. Still, we were all really freaked out that this guy was out there and that he knew where we lived. We made rules that my brother cannot be outside alone. My father and I usually took a rifle and leaned it on something near where we were working from then on. We made a show for the first few days of going outside and shooting. We wanted to let him know if he was around that we were armed and could defend if needed. Like I said, we never saw him again. For years though, things would go missing from our shed, and our neighbors talked about things missing as well. Things like spray paint, gardening tools. We had a big deep freezer in our shed that we kept game we had hunted in. Once we discovered a large chunk of deer gnawed on the ground. Whoever did it had to have been chewing on it while it was frozen. We also found a sneaker in our yard with spray paint all inside it, like it had been used for huffing. Russia in the 90s was a strange time. The Soviet Union had just fell in the 80s and everybody was still learning how to live without it. Police were of little help and often people living in rural areas were forced to basically deal with problems more or less on their own. Lots of things like lynchings and mob justice. There were several occasions that we had to form a posse to get things done. Sadly, that day no justice was had for our poor pigs.
Pro tip. It's not just the wilderness, my man. Roofer/urban explorer from St. Petersburg here, can post stories about shit I've seen in the city in its roofs, from innocent stuff like illegal immigrants' dens and rotting junkies to dissected animals, bone trinkets, spooks with sniper rifles and teen self-end cult messages. With my buddy hanging out in the old district of the city near Sovietskaya streets in St. Petersburg. Lots of buildings falling apart, little light, poor people. Mostly unexplored by fellow roofers. Climb a half-abandoned apartment which is adjacent to several blocks, good option to explore. Me and my man stroll the roofs, take a few pics, talk in low voices. Decide to use another exit, check entrances on another roof, always good to have a backup plan. Enter the area below the roof through a small window. Rancid fucking smell. WTF. Notice a cat strung up, something sharp cut her abdomen, even bone, cat just hangs in there. We weren't really afraid as we both were pretty big guys with leather gloves, boots, friend carried a monkey wrench, and a knife. Not uncommon to have fights with rival roofers mad about their turf, hobos, or people living in the house. A friend explores the rest of the cherdak with a flashlight, finds a dead crow and small necklaces made of bird bones. Hey man, WTF is that shite? We find the door, it budges easily, the house looks abandoned and literally condemned. The entrance to the building is welded shut. Have to jump from the first floor window. But the fucked up thing was that we heard voices coming from over us as we jumped, too, both male. Likely some dog hunter punks hunting urban fauna, but those fuckers sometimes pack traumatic weapons, which shoot rubber bullets, so we left quickly.
Sup/x/. Do you know anything about taiga near Arkhangelsk? I bet the first images popping in your head are swamps, cranberries and Lomonosov. But I will tell you this tale I remembered while I was messing with old papers. I have a weird habit to store everything, from letters to invoices, like an archive without any goal. Fortunately, I have enough time to format it well. I was rereading old letters from my aunt living in the countryside near Arkhangelsk. I went there when I was much younger, and ever since then. Actually, last time it was 3 years ago, I was called to help my aunt move to another house, but it didn't happen, so I was just messing around and drinking with locals. In exchange for good authentic moonshine, I got a grateful listener of various countryside stories. One of them, named Ded Luchak, aka Nikolai Lukich, although old and a heavy drinker, kept his mind fresh and memories clear. Ded Luchak was born in such a heart of the country, there was no electricity, no council, not even a church. The place was called Lower Vojdanga. You will never find it in documents, like hundreds of similar villages. Local scribes were driven crazy from loads of toponyms down there, from the fact that many villages had identical names, so they recorded localities all at once with new names, like Filomenovsko settlement. People, though, kept calling their villages with original names, driving authorities crazy once more. Ded Luchak was willing to talk about his homeland. Lower Vojdanga was an old village near a river, but the river eventually swallowed and turned into a swamp. All that was left was logging, berries and shrooms, and peat extraction. Several times a year came carts with news, salt, matches etc. Nothing extraordinary at all. But when I asked about Upper Vojdanga, logically speaking there must be one, Luchak told me this story. Upper Vojdanga was ruined by Mshays long ago, under Tsars. Local fool went looking for moss to fill gaps in his log house, but he brought back Mshays. According to Luchak, it looked like ordinary moss from swamps, but shaded blue and smelled like mowed hay. If locals stumbled upon small patches of Mshays, they collected it, dried and sold it to Nenets and Komyaki, and if they happened to find large clearing with Mshays, they marked it around 100 feet away. Apparently it doesn't grow that much, so old markings served well. Those who went to these clearings never returned. As I have been told, must any animal, or livestock, or human, go there, Mets would give off either spores or gas that caused paralysis. And in Upper Vojdanga, that guy covered his house in Mshays. Next year it was found out that people of Upper Vojdanga either did not recognize Mshays, or they couldn't burn that house quickly enough. Or, as I think now, they didn't want to. People from wagons told about this to guys in Lower Vojdanga, and when they came, all they saw was log cabins, covered in sheets, and the thick smell of mown hay. The place was burned, besieged with deadwood and furrow. Authorities didn't care about locals' businesses, locals themselves took it as another harshness of life. Road to Upper Vojdanga was dug up, tried not to go that way ever since, and also not to graze cattle here. Things were still just like they were before, naturally, if not that one case, that Ded Luchak happened to witness. After World War II, 3 geologists came with carts. Well, maybe it's not geology, they were examining terrains around for industrial peatland development. I will keep calling them geologists. Townfolk hosted them at Luka's house, father of Luchak. Next day geologists went to swamps, refused to take a guide with them. They can be forgiven. As I've been told, locals were not the nicest and most hospitable people. The only thing that they've been told was not to go near Upper Vojdanga if they want to come back. They've been told this story, but geologists decided that locals tried to hide something there from the Soviets. So they got their bags, instruments, and went straight to the ashes. Locals decided not to talk them out. On the third day, one of the geologists was found at the edge of the village. Someone went looking for the missing pig, but found a poor guy instead. Tattered by branches, covered in blue moss and absolutely blind, he found his way out of the swamp by touch. People were called to find others. Luchak went with them. He was 10 years old by then. And yet after almost 70 years, he was telling about how his father was washing mshays out with kerosene. He told women to heat a bath and leave the guy there. Men, armed with kerosene, stakes, and ropes, went rescuing other explorers. They arrived at the ashes after half a day of walking. First thing they noticed was smell, then they saw grayish-blue carpet-like clearing of mshays, surrounded by rings of dry grass. Luchak vividly described the clearing, depressingly calm and smooth, except for 2 maybe bumps or what looked like a tree broken in half. The one that was bigger was wiggling a bit. Men pulled him off with the rope. No mistake, it was one of geologists, pretty much had found what was hidden from him. The guy was still alive, croaking through a crust of moss, tightly covering his body even under his clothes. He was dragged from mshays, and men tried to clear up his face. To do that, they needed to rip out small roots of mshays from his skin. After a layer of moss was off his mouth, he started to sound more distinctly. Geologists tried to say something. All that dead Luchak got was, "God in the swamp, there's God's light, let me back to God." Then the geologist suddenly tried to get up, tried to crawl, but subsided before men could do anything. Later, he was burned right there. The guy who got back on his own survived, though losing his eyes, and one of the legs was cut off by Luka. The moss got in his boot and gnawed the flesh. In a month a car came for geologists. They were told what happened, guided to the place. After another month, the military came, on trucks. Military stayed there, and locals were loaded into trucks and evacuated first in Plestsy, where Plesetsk spaceport is now, and then were resettled in the south of the region, told not to talk too much about it. So Luchak got in Ant's village, got a job in Lespermaz, and then retired to make moonshine and tell stories. So there it is. Maybe Dad made it all up, but that was a good story for me.
Russian Anon here, lived in Russia until recently and moved to America. Will Greentext some of my experiences if anyone's interested. I was 16 at the time. My friends dare me to go camping in the wilderness to prove my manliness. Decide to do it because why not? Find the perfect place. Small clearing in woods. Have tents and basic materials for fire and things. I also took my dad's pistol in secret. Trip goes well until nightfall. Sleeping soundly. Around 3 a.m. Hear shuffling outside the tent. Fuck me. It is definitely walking. It gets right up to the side of my tent. Gripping pistol for dear life. Walking stops. Can see a silhouette in the moonlight. This thing looks tall as shit. It stands there forever it seems. Its arm starts moving. It places its hand on the side of my tent. It pushes a bit and leaves its hand there. Now this is a decision that I seriously regret. Muster up the courage. Raise the pistol in my hands. Press it against the hand on the tent. Pull trigger. And that's the last thing I remember. I woke up the next day on the ground. The tent was all fucked up and all my shit was scattered everywhere. Also my nose must have been bleeding because there was dry blood coming from it. Not my spookiest encounter, but it was my first.
Polish friend here. Have lots of spooky Inwood stories to share if anyone is interested. Plus local urban legends, etc. Let's start off with an urban legend. I used to live in a region called Upper Silesia, which is generally unremarkable when it comes to spooky stuff, outside some made-up ghost stories catering to children and tourists. Several large cities, now post-industrial, the rest of the region being forests, farmlands and limestone quarries. There is a city, however, similarly unremarkable, and in this city there is a house, Pikrel. What is peculiar about this building is that among hundreds of people who tried to break in, it was abandoned during late 80s, early 90s, hastily and leaving everything intact, and spend a night there. Not a single person managed to stay more than several minutes. I know of hardened boneheads who regularly fight in brawls that were unable to withstand the negative energy this house gives off. Everyone reports this. All the furniture without a single scratch, a lot of dust, magazines on the tables, some rotten food, clothes strewn around. The city council denies any knowledge of paranormal phenomena, obviously, and there are no records of current ownership. Due to some legal bullshit they can't bulldoze it, so it will remain a mystery for some more time. Okay, let's continue. When I was 16 I went on a hiking trip with my 2 high school friends. Ordinary affair. A tent, backpacks, some food, tools and spare cash. My father drove us to a campsite near the ruins of a late medieval castle, Pikrel, the site of a fatal accident. A climber fell to his death 20 years ago there, so we could choose one of the many available paths, color-coded for length and difficulty. Being the friends that we were, we decided to skip planning and hiking, and instead went to a nearby shop and got drunk. After the nightfall and a sudden spike in bravery, however, all of us went out in the search of adventures. Now keep in mind that while the campsite itself was pretty close to human settlements, the whole area is a bumfuck nowhere inhabited by Eastern European equivalents of hillbillies and white trash, not exactly the go-to crowd for medical emergencies and help. We didn't go far, afraid of the dark, and when we came back we saw 2 figures sitting in our tents, flashlights in hands. One of us, the youngest one, told us to simply wait it out in the bushes. We did not bring any valuable stuff, and he'd rather lose his wallet than his head. I didn't need more convincing. What's interesting is that when we took another look at our tent, there was nobody there. Not a single person, no lights, nothing. In a matter of seconds the whole scene disappeared and the only thing left intact was our tent. The 3 of us hesitantly returned to the site and went to sleep. The next night was the ghost hunting night. Armed with mighty Nokias we set out to find evil spirits living in the spooky Polish woods. All of us shone the flashlights ahead, as if we were Bravo team from Resident Evil 1, and one of us jokingly remarked that one of the branches looks like a kid nailed to the tree. Next thing I know we're running away like little girls, while the phones are recording everything, from an unidentified creature jogging on all fours at a relatively moderate speed. Luckily our stamina didn't run out and the campsite was pretty far away from the site of the encounter. When we later checked our phones, the only legible thing was the sound of us running on gravel, and a high-pitched shriek not unlike those horror movie screams. To this day I'm not sure whether that was an audio glitch and a visual hallucination, or if we really met some kind of revenant or mutant.
So, I am Russian, and I would like to translate into English one of the best creepypasta series I've ever read. All the pastas are about Yakutia. You can Google it, it's just what you want. Tundra, no people and scary shit. And yes, I am sorry for my terrible English, like really. So, here we go. Story 1. The first story is connected with Sulukans. U is pronounced like in French. Dunno how to write this sound using English alphabet. Basically, in Yakutian folklore, Sulukans are water spirits. Yakuts are pagans, and they believe that every area has its own spirits that are in control there. Though, it is worth mentioning that after Yakutia entered Russia in 17th century, local religion mixed with Christianity and changed, having now some of the elements classic theist religions have. Nonetheless, those spirits I was talking about in the beginning stayed, and Sulukans are one of them. So, the tradition says that Sulukans spend all the time underwater, without any interactions with people. You can't say that they're evil spirits, but you can't call them good either. In addition, you won't be able to find a description of their appearance anywhere, so you can just imagine your generic water spirit with some fishy traits, something like the Innsmouth people of Lovecraft. So, getting closer to the story itself. Only once in the year, during Christmastide, they leave their ponds, lakes and rivers and, in abandoned houses, far from people, they play cards and chat. They don't just play for fun, they play for their underwater money, that look like golden coins. And if you want to steal their money you gotta go to an abandoned house, during Christmastide, wearing lots of clothes, obviously, 'cause it's as cold at nights as -50 Celsius. Wait until Sulukans gather around, and then suddenly jump from your hide spot screaming and making noises, and turn their table with money. This will cause them to run in fear, and you can just take money and go home. But it is essential to spend it in 3 days, because after this, money will turn into seaweed, that it actually is. But money isn't the only reason why you can be interested in visiting their meetings. As I mentioned, they chat, while playing cards, and they don't just chat, they are speaking about future of the nearby villages and people, and you might get some important information about yourself, your family, friends, etc. And finally, the story begins. Middle of Yakutia, January, Yule and incredibly cold weather. 2 young brothers, all brave and strong, decided to go and listen to those Sulukans and, if lucky, to get their money. They didn't tell anyone about their plans, because people in Yakutia take folklore seriously, and parents, probably, wouldn't let them go. The brothers had chosen an old and empty booth located somewhere around the village they lived in. So, in the evening, they put on their warmest clothes, took 2 bottles of vodka, and headed to that booth. Brothers were in a good mood, because it was interesting for them, because there were 2 of them, so there weren't any reasons for panic, and frost was nothing to them. They came into that old house, got under a table they found and covered themselves in a thick blanket they brought. Brothers spent several hours waiting for the spirits to come, chatting quietly and drinking vodka, and when it was after midnight, they heard the door creaking. Brothers strained. Here it comes, Sulukans are coming. But, suddenly, it all went quiet. Then again, they heard a creaking sound, louder this time, and they heard a muffled sound of something like chicken clucking. Out of nowhere, the younger brother started yelling like crazy, threw away the blanket, and rushed to the way out. The older brother, of course, followed him. But he was unlucky, he stumbled on his way out and fell on the floor. Older brother started calling for help, but then he made this choking sound, and started yelling like he was burned alive. Hearing that, the younger brother shat bricks and ran even faster. After about an hour he came to his village and told his father everything. Obviously the father was not happy with this behavior of his sons. He yelled at the son and told the story of the booth. A long time ago, even before the 1917 revolution, there lived a family, and all of the members of this family died because of mysterious circumstances. People who lived nearby decided that this was an evil spirit's work, and from that time they stayed away from the booth, even though the land around was quite fertile. It was clear to all the people, except for the brothers, that no Sulukun would go into that old house. But the evil spirit could still live in there, and those two fuckers were quite a prey for it. So, father and the younger brother got in a SUV, and went straight to that booth. They came quickly, and everything seemed quiet and well, at first glance. The younger brother shat his pants and refused to enter the house, so he stayed in the car. Father had to go there all by himself. He found older brother right where he stumbled, face turned to the ground. Trails showed that he didn't move much after falling, and died almost instantly. The body had already stiffened, thanks to the severe cold outside. All this made father burst out sobbing, but there was nothing he could do about it, so he took the body into the car and drove home. When they came back, and took all the clothes, they found a huge bruise under the older brother's right shoulder blade, as if something hit him from behind through all the layers of clothing. Later, the younger brother said, what made him cry and run away? When the door started creaking the second time, he lifted his blanket a little, and saw a giant human silhouette, like 3 meters in height, walking towards them.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.